Welcome back to the Runner's Paradox podcast. Today we are strapping in for something that I think gets to the very heart of so many running issues. We're reflecting on Chapter 18 of the Runner's Paradox.
The lower body, a dynamic system of transmission.
Exactly. And it's a title that it challenges this default mindset that so many of us have.
Oh, absolutely. I think most runners, and I was definitely in this camp for years, we all suffer from what you could call the quad illusion.
The quad illusion, I know it well. It's that feeling that if my legs are strong, my running must be strong. You look in the mirror, you see your quads, you see your calves.
Right.
You figure, okay, I'm doing the work. If I feel weak on a run, the answer must be, what? More squats, more leg press.
Precisely. But the core idea in the book, which comes from Ying's work with thousands of runners and her own journey, is that this view is not just incomplete. It's actually setting us up to fail.
How so?
Well, you can have all that muscle mass, you can feel really strong in the gym, but then you get 5-6 miles into a run and that strength, it just isn't there. It doesn't translate into coordinated forward momentum.
I literally had a run this week that was a perfect example of this. I was an hour in, feeling pretty good, and then I just started to notice my left hip felt, I don't know, a little tight, restricted.
Not pain, just a feeling.
Exactly. It wasn't pain, but it felt asymmetrical. And what was so wild is that within, I swear, half a mile of noticing that subtle thing in my left hip, my right knee started to feel this little nagging strain.
And that is the dynamic system of transmission in action, but working against you.
So that wasn't just a random tweet.
No, not at all. That tiny restriction in your hip, that was a failure of calibration. And all the force, all the torque that your hip was supposed to manage had to go somewhere. So the system immediately rerouted it to the next available joint.
Which is my opposite knee.
Which was your opposite knee. The lower body isn't just a collection of muscles. It's this incredibly sensitive, integrated system built for one thing, transferring force seamlessly.
Okay, so let's really unpack this today. Our mission here is to explore this paradox of the lower body, how it's so good at compensating that it can hide these deep-lurking problems until it's too late.
Right, and we need to look at the whole system, from the big toe all the way up to the pelvis, because it's all connected.
And this isn't just a pet theory, right? This is backed up.
Oh, for decades. The whole idea of the kinetic chain is really well established in biomechanics research. You look at some of the foundational work, like studies from Dye back in 2005 or Powers in 2010 on knee pain. The message is always the same. Knee pain, shin splints, plantar fasciitis, they are rarely isolated problems. They are consequences.
Consequences of what specifically?
Of abnormal torque. That twisting force has to come from somewhere. And it almost always stems from one of two places. Either weakness up high, so your hips and pelvis, or instability down low, your feet and ankles. For instance, Powers' research was fascinating. It showed that runners who came in with patellofemoral pain, that classic runner's knee, consistently had weaker hip abductor and external rotator muscles. Your glutes, basically.
So the glutes aren't doing their job.
Exactly. The glutes aren't stabilizing the femur, so the leg collapses inward and the knee joint just takes a beating. It's a totally predictable cascade of failure.
So for anyone listening who's dealing with that nagging shin splint or knee ache, the takeaway is stop staring at the site of the pain.
Yes. Look above it and look below it. And for everyone following along, this whole reflection is pulled right from the pages of The Runner's Paradox, Chapter 18 specifically. It's really a guide to help you see these patterns in yourself. And you can find more info and the exercises we're going to talk about at therunnersparadox.com.
Okay, so let's start where the book starts, at the real center of it all.
Yeah.
The pelvis. I love the analogy Ying uses. She calls it the body's crucial teacup.
It's such a perfect visual, isn't it? Because you immediately get it. You don't want to spill a tea. And biomechanically, it's spot on. The pelvis is the bridge. It connects your core and torso to your legs. To run well, that teacup has to stay level. And it's held level by your deep core muscles and, crucially, your glutes.
But for so many of us, that balance is just gone. We sit all day, our hip flexors get tight, our glutes basically fall asleep.
And that's when the teacup starts to tip. If one muscle group is too tight or another is too weak, it pulls the whole structure out of alignment. You get that anterior pelvic tilt, or you see one hip drop with every step.
The shifty pelvis.
The shifty pelvis. And on a run, that is a massive energy leak. The force is no longer going straight down into the ground. It's being wasted side to side, and it's introducing all these damaging rotational forces into your joints.
Can you break that down a bit more? How does the body actually rewire that force path when the pelvis shifts.
Okay, so let's say the glute medius, that's the muscle on the side of your hip, is weak on your right leg. When you stand on your right leg, your left hip will drop. It's called a Trendelenburg gait. To stop yourself from falling over, your brain instantly tells your torso to lean to the right.
Okay, a little side bend.
A little side bend, but that creates compression in your lower back. And here's the kicker, your right femur, your thigh bone, will rotate inward to try and find some stability.
And that inward rotation is what messes with the knee.
That's what sends the kneecap off its track and gives you that sharp pain right under the patella. The force path is no longer straight. It's twisting and shearing its way down your leg.
Wow. So proximal weakness becomes distal pain every single time. Which brings us to another huge point in the chapter. Stride and cadence come from the hips, not the feet.
100%. We have to stop thinking about foot turnover and start thinking about hip function. Good running is this continuous forward-leaning cycling motion.
And the leg that's in the air is actually just as important as the one on the ground.
It's critical. That swing leg should be actively lifting from the hip. That hip flexion is what pulls the pelvis forward and keeps your momentum going. It's what prevents you from sitting back in the bucket, so to speak.
Lifting from the hip, not just kicking with the foot.
That is the engine. But if your hips are tight or your hip flexors are weak, you can't open up your stride. Your stride length gets shorter. So what does the body do to keep the pace?
It cheats.
It cheats. It starts arching the back or rotating the torso or just pushing off way too hard from the foot to try and make up for that lack of hip extension.
And this leads right into what the book calls the paradox of compensation. We mistake all that extra movement for power.
We do. We see a lot of motion and we think, wow, I must be running hard.
Like the classic over-the-top butt kick. You see someone running and their heel is flying way up high and they look like they're sprinting.
It's so deceptive.
Yeah.
And Ying points this out so well. For many runners, that big back kick isn't coming from a powerful hip extension at all. It's coming from the knee and the ankle.
So the glutes aren't really in the picture.
They're late to the party or they barely show up. Instead, the hamstrings and the calves are working overtime to yank the heel up. It looks like a big range of motion, but it actually signals that the stride is totally closed off at the hip.
And what's the cost of that? Biomechanically.
The cost is enormous. Your gluteus maximus is the biggest, most powerful, most fatigue-resistant muscle in your body. It's designed for propulsion.
Right.
When it doesn't fire on time, the hamstrings and calves have to do its job, and they are not designed for that. So they get tired fast, you get that excessive heel lift, and you're basically using tiny muscles to do a giant's work. It's just incredibly inefficient.
And all that inefficiency and sheer force travels right down the chain. Which brings us to the poor knee.
The knee. Always caught in the middle. The messenger that gets shot.
It's just delivering the bad news from upstairs.
Exactly. When a runner comes in with knee pain, the first question isn't, what's wrong with your knee? It's, what is the hip not doing? Or what is the foot overdoing?
Let's talk about one of the most common patterns I see, and that the book mentions, the locked knee runner.
Ah, yes. This is often a deeply ingrained habit, maybe from years of standing with your knees hyperextended. In running, it means you're relying on the passive structures of the knee, your ligaments, your cartilage for stability, instead of the active, powerful muscles of the hip.
So the hips get tight because you're not using them.
And the knee gets destroyed from overuse and all that sheer force. And if a hip is restricted, the body will always try to find that missing range of motion somewhere else.
It tries to buy length from the knee.
It does. If your hip can't rotate properly, your body will compensate by forcing the knee to hyperextend or move sideways. That pushes the joint past its happy place, and that's when you get things like IT band syndrome, where it's just rubbing and creating friction, or you start wearing down the cartilage under your kneecap.
The knee is literally paying the price for the hip's lockdown.
Every time.
Okay, so that's upstream. What about downstream? The ankle and the foot, we tend to just think of them as levers.
A huge mistake. They are incredibly complex dynamic structures. They need mobility, they need strength, and they need this amazing neuromuscular finesse to work properly.
So how does a problem in the hip show up in the foot?
Let's go back to that tight hip that's shortening your stride. If you can't get full extension from the hip, but you need to maintain your pace, you have to find that velocity somewhere else.
For the ankle.
From the ankle. So what happens is, during push-off, the ankle is forced to lift off the ground too early. Prematurely.
And that messes up the whole sequence.
It does. It limits the dorsiflexion, the ability of your shin to come forward over your foot, which you need for a good toe off. And it means the foot lands without proper control. So the structures that take the hit are the plantar fascia and the Achilles tendon. They're doing the shock absorption job that the glutes were supposed to start way up the chain.
It really is a total failure in the chain of command, isn't it? The body just wants to move forward, and it will sacrifice anything to do it.
Which brings us right to the foot itself, and specifically the part that Ying had this huge revelation about after her own injury, the big toe.
The big toe, it seems so minor.
It is disproportionately important. It's the final anchor point. It's the lever that, when it works right, synchronizes the entire system.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of that, the windlass mechanism. It sounds very technical.
It's actually one of the most elegant bits of engineering in the human body. Think of the plantar fascia on the bottom of your foot like a thick rubber band.
Okay.
When your big toe lifts up during push-off, it pulls that rubber band taut. That tension instantly lifts your arch, and it turns your foot from a flexible, shock-absorbing bag of bones into a rigid, strong lever.
And you need that rigidity to push off powerfully. You can't push off a floppy foot.
You can't. It would be like trying to jump off a mattress. That rigidity is essential. And what's more, that tensioning action helps to sequence the firing of everything up the chain, your calf, your hamstring, your glute. It's the final switch that turns on the power.
But for that to work, the foot needs some internal support, right? It's not just the fascia.
Absolutely. And this is where those little intrinsic muscles in the arch come in. The ones nobody ever trains. They're supposed to provide the active support to hold the arch up right before the windlass mechanism kicks in.
And if they're weak?
If they're weak, the foot gets lazy. It relies on the passive fascia, the mechanism is delayed, and the foot stays floppy for too long.
So you lose power on push-off and you lose shock absorption on landing.
Exactly. It's a double whammy. And to bring it full circle, when someone has restricted hips, a very common compensation is to overpronate, to let the foot roll in excessively. That overpronation keeps the arch collapsed and completely sabotages the windlass mechanism. The foot never gets rigid, and you end up with chronic tension in the plantar fascia.
This all seems to connect directly to the hard data we see in running economy, especially ground contact time, GCT.
Oh, it's a perfect correlation. GCT is just how long your foot stays on the ground with each step. And across the board, a shorter GCT is the hallmark of an efficient runner. It means you're elastic, you have quick recoil, you're using your tendons like springs.
Faster runners are springier runners.
They are, and this has huge implications for training. To get better GCT, you don't just need strength, you need to train for stiffness. Not muscle stiffness, but tendon stiffness. That's where things like plyometrics, bounding, skipping, those quick contact drills come in. They train your nervous system to be reactive and explosive.
So if short GCT is the goal, what's the real cost of a long GCT, which we see in novices or when we get tired?
Long GCT means you're spending more time on the ground braking and then muscling your way through push-off instead of using that free elastic energy. But the most compelling data, for me, is on GCT asymmetry.
An imbalance between the left and right foot.
Yes. The research on this is stunning. If one foot stays on the ground just a tiny bit longer than the other, we're talking a 2% imbalance, the metabolic cost goes through the roof.
How much?
For a marathoner, that tiny 2% difference requires about an extra 180 kilocalories to finish the race. That's a whole energy gel, maybe two. It's often the difference between hitting the wall and finishing strong. And that GCT imbalance is almost always linked to a muscle imbalance.
So is the GCT difference causing the muscle weakness or the other way around?
It's the other way around. Your weaker leg, the one with the lazy glute, has to stay on the ground longer because it's struggling to stabilize you and generate force. It's delaying push-off because it doesn't have the horsepower to get you off the ground quickly. If you fix the muscle imbalance, you fix the GCT imbalance, and you basically reclaim 180 free calories. It's amazing.
Okay, let's just pause here for a second because this is a lot to take in.
Yep.
We've established this incredible chain reaction from the pelvis to the hip to the knee to the big toe. It's not about brute force. It's about systemic integrity.
That is the whole message of Chapter 18 of The Runner's Paradox. If you're tired of just guessing, of chasing pain, and you want to really understand your body as this integrated machine, the book is the resource for that. It lays all this out. You can find more details and purchase the book at therunnersparadox.com.
So now let's pivot. We've done the analysis. Let's talk application. Because the hardest part, as Ying herself notes, is that our bodies are so good at compensating that we can feel smooth even when our gait is a total mess. How do we even begin to spot this stuff in ourselves?
We have to get off autopilot, and the best way to do that is with simple objective tests that don't let you cheat. I'm talking about basic unilateral stability exercises.
Like just a simple one-legged stand. What are we looking for there?
It's so revealing. Stand on your right leg. The first thing to watch is your left hip. Does it immediately drop? That's a tell. Or does your right hip have to jut way out to the side to keep your balance?
The hip hitch.
The hip hitch. Both of those are clear signs that your gluteus medius on that standing leg is not doing its job. And that is the exact pattern that leads to the inward knee collapse we were just talking about.
And what about that other big compensation, overstriding? So many people don't even know they're doing it.
Overstriding is almost always a subconscious attempt to make up for weak hip extension. You can't push yourself forward powerfully, so you reach out with your foot to try and grab more ground, but all you're doing is slamming on the brakes with every single step.
And that shock goes right up the shin and into the knee.
It's a recipe for shin splints and stress fractures. So smarter training isn't about running more. It's about eliminating that compensation by learning to fire the muscles in the right sequence.
Okay, so let's get practical. Let's talk about the foundational exercise from the book, the pelvis control exercise.
This one is so subtle but so important. It's all about finding a neutral pelvis using your deep core and glutes, not your lower back. You start just sitting on a chair, find your sit bones. No, gently try to tuck your tailbone underneath you, as if you're slightly lifting your pubic bone toward your belly button. But, and this is key without rounding your lower back, it's a tiny movement, engaging those deep, deep core muscles.
It sounds almost impossible. Why is that so critical for running?
Because that is the exact position of stability you need to initiate the running motion. Proper running is a controlled forward fall that starts from the pelvis. If you can't hold this neutral position, you'll default to arching your back or sitting back, and you'll be pushing with your feet instead of falling with your core. This little seated tuck teaches your brain to fire the right muscles first.
Going back to my story about my left hip feeling restricted, would something like the banded dynamic lunge be a good diagnostic and corrective tool for that?
Perfect for it. The banded lunge is fantastic because it forces you to maintain straight line alignment. You put a resistance band around your thighs just above the knees. When you step into a lunge, that band is going to try and pull your front knee inward.
Right, toward the midline.
And your job is to actively use your glutes to drive the knee outward, keeping it tracking right over your foot. You're fighting the band.
And that prevents the compensations.
It prevents the three big ones: your pelvis twisting, your knee collapsing inward, and your foot rolling over. If you can't control those things in a slow lunge, you have zero chance of controlling them when you're fatigued on a run. It forces those key hip stabilizers to wake up and do their job.
Okay, let's talk general strength for a minute. The book makes a really strong case for big compound movements like squats and deadlifts over isolation machines, like, say, the knee extension machine. Why is that so important?
It all comes down to functional coordination. A knee extension machine works your quads, and that's it. One muscle, one plane of motion. But running is this incredibly complex multi-plane activity that needs your quads, hamstrings, glutes, and core all firing together.
That idea of co-contraction. The muscles on both sides of the joint firing at once to create stability.
Precisely. Squats and deadlifts demand that co-contraction. They teach the muscles to work as a team just like they have to in running. If you only train in isolation, you can build up these huge, powerful quads that just dominate everything, and the glutes and hamstrings never learn to do their part. You create imbalances.
And of course, strength is useless without mobility, without the range of motion to actually use it.
Non-negotiable. And a great way to check this is with the seated knee stretch from the book. You just sit upright and try to straighten one leg out in front of you. If you immediately feel like you have to slump and round your back to do it, your hamstrings are too tight.
And that slump posture in a stretch is exactly what you'll do on a run.
It is. Your tight hamstrings will pull your pelvis backward, you won't be able to get good hip extension, and your knees and ankles will be forced to pick up the slack. Just working on that simple stretch while keeping your pelvis neutral can directly improve your running form.
So we have stability, we have mobility, and then we need to put it all together. We need the drills to make it fast and elastic for that short GCT.
That's the final piece, the proprioception. We talked about it before: bounding, skipping, quick feet drills. Those exercises train the stiffness in your tendons. They teach your nervous system to act like a spring, not a piston. It's about training that rapid recoil. That's the secret to running economy.
So let's frame this whole thing as a negotiation then. The lower body is in this constant negotiation between control, which comes from the core and glutes, and propulsion, which is forward movement.
And the success of that negotiation really depends on your posture. Your goal is to maintain that slight forward lean, like a well-stacked plank, so the lower body is in the perfect position to do its job. If your core is weak and you're leaning back, you've already lost the negotiation.
This goes right back to Ying's own story. That pubic ramus stress fracture she had early in her career. It's such a powerful example of what happens when the system fails long term.
It's a classic injury for high-volume runners with poor core control. The pubic bone is part of that pelvic ring. If the deep core and glutes aren't holding that ring stable, the joint in the front, the pubic symphysis, just gets sheared and pulled apart with every single stride.
So the bone takes the impact instead of the muscles.
And eventually, the bone fails. It's the ultimate proof that pelvic control isn't a nice to have, it's fundamental to avoiding catastrophic injury.
And that control has to extend all the way down the chain. Let's make that final connection again. The big toe to the glute.
You have to feel it. You have to practice it consciously. When you're doing a calf raise or pushing off, dig your big toe into the ground and paw back. You should feel an immediate, strong contraction in your glute. If all you feel is calf, the chain is broken, you're driving from the bottom, not from the top.
So it's that coordinated coupling. The big toe engages the windlass, the ankle stabilizes, the hip extends. That's what creates the powerful, efficient lever.
That's the whole system working in harmony. And we even see this with the elites. Think of someone like Paula Radcliffe. She had a very unique, recognizable gait with that head bob.
Right.
But she was one of the most efficient marathoners in history. And what was happening behind the scenes? She was working relentlessly on her core and postural strength. Her coaches knew that the only way to minimize her injury risks was to strengthen the system to reduce those compensations. The goal isn't to look like a textbook runner. It's to eliminate the dysfunctions that lead to breakdown.
It just confirms it. No matter your individual style, the principle is the same. You have to strengthen the core system to make the transmission system of the lower body work for you, not against you.
That's the negotiation, control versus propulsion. And the quality of that negotiation determines everything.
This whole reflection just makes it so clear that running is a full-body conversation. Every little ache is a symptom telling a story about something happening somewhere else. The goal, then, is to get fluent in our own body's language.
And fluency starts with honest reflection. So as you start to think about this on your own runs, we want to leave you with 5 questions drawn from the structure of the book.
First, think about where you get tired. What part of your lower body fatigues first, and what is that fatigue compensating for? Are your calves on fire because your glutes checked out a mile ago?
Second, how often do you train the muscles you don't see in the mirror? We're talking about the deep core, those stabilizer glutes, the little intrinsic muscles in your feet. Are they getting any attention at all?
Third, do you recognize your own ground contact pattern? Are you a loud runner, a heel slammer, that means high braking forces, or is your footfall quick and light? Can you feel that potential 180-calorie energy leak on your weaker side?
Fourth, how much awareness do you actually have of your hips when you run? Are you driving from your hips, controlling your stability from your center? Or are they just along for the ride while your knees and feet do all the hard work?
And the last one, number 5. What would your running look like? What would it feel like if your whole lower body moved in harmony as one integrated system of control and power?
These questions are really designed to shift your focus from just logging miles to actively calibrating your machine. But, and this is the hard part, knowing what to do is often so much easier than actually doing it.
That is the ultimate paradox, isn't it?
Mm.
We know the right drills, we can watch the videos, but changing those deep-seated dysfunctional habits feels almost impossible sometimes.
And that difficulty, that resistance to change, is exactly what we're going to explore in our next reflection. We'll be unpacking Chapter 19, Why is it so hard for runners to change, even when they know better?
That's going to be a crucial conversation.
We'll talk about Ying's own experience seeing her old bad habits creep back in 10 years after she thought she'd fix them. And we'll get into the neuroscience of why changing motor patterns is such a challenge.
I can't wait for that one. Understanding why it's hard is just as important as knowing what to do.
Absolutely. So if you've been battling a stubborn injury or just feel stuck in your running, we hope you'll join us. Please subscribe and maybe share this episode with a running buddy who's going through it.
And remember, this entire conversation is part of our ongoing reflection on the runner's paradox. The book is available for purchase now, and you can find more resources and exercises at therunnersparadox.com.
Until next time, maybe listen to this again on your next easy run. And just bring a fresh sense of curiosity to that amazing system moving you forward. Run strong and run smart.